Welcome to Your Way Now. We're Sue and Sarah, coaches supporting people living with cancer and those moving beyond it. Each episode shares real stories, expert insight, and gentle tools to help you feel more supported, physically, emotionally, and mentally. This is Your Way Now.
Get the strength you want and need from real stories and expert voices. It's time for Your Way Now.
Hello and welcome to this very first episode of Your Way Now, the podcast. Just saying that before we go into Your Way Now, the TV show, the film series, etc. This is Your Way Now, the
That's
podcast.
for the future.
With myself, Sue Brown, and Sarah Hurst. And today's episode, we are, the first two episodes, we're concentrating on us as the hosts and our stories and giving people a bit of a background as to why we're doing this and our lives so far. So, Sarah, thank you. For those who don't know your story, perhaps you could sort of tell us a bit about you as a person beyond the sort of titles of that you have now, about the person that you are. What would you like to share?
So, hi, I'm Sarah. So obviously I'm the co-host with Sue on this hopefully incredible podcast where we're going to be sharing, as Sue said, lots of information to hopefully help you move forward with and beyond cancer. So my story is quite complex and we need to build this into quite a short space of time. And I am a person who has had the journey of cancer. And I don't like to ever think of myself as a cancer victim or a cancer survivor or anything like that. I think labels are not always very helpful. But my journey starts quite way back in terms of stress. I think I was somebody who always appeared to be really quite capable on the outside. I learned how to be independent from quite a young age, sent off to boarding school and things like that. And we were,
I didn't know that.
we navigated life in quite probably a different way to some people as well. But you were sort of forced into a sense of independence. And then I navigated my life when I look back on fight and flight. I mean, that
Really?
was,
Yeah.
how I did. It was, created dramas. How can it's really difficult to describe, but that just became the norm. That was just how my life was. And actually, I didn't recognise it, not until the last few years when obviously everything has changed so much. And actually, from learning my coaching skills and journey and actually looking at self-coaching and having coaching and everything else,
Your
where I've really
discovery,
looked,
yeah.
that self-discovery of me,
Yeah.
when I look back at my life and think, crikey, that was a lot of stuff, and it was a lot of stuff that I went through. Some of it of my own choosing, because I do think we can create our own dramas.
Yeah.
And I'm an advanced shadow work coach as well, so I do look at how we can create our own stuff. But ultimately, I definitely lived. I was the person who lived in survival mode.
Yeah. But interesting
way.
that started at such an early age. You mentioned going to boarding school and I mean, you hear some stories. I've not experienced that myself, but you hear some stories about the stresses that caused, depending on where you are and who you're surrounded by, of course. And then sort of moving forward, you're a busy businesswoman.
Yeah.
A very successful career in the beauty industry.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned when you did get have a cancer diagnosis, where did that process start in sort of identifying or sort of looking at what part stress and pressure, if you like, sort of played in your in your illness and in the diagnosis?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, Sue, because I've actually been diagnosed with cancer 3 times. So the first time was in 2005.
Don't do anything by halves, do you?
No, I don't do anything by halves. That's the point. So in 2005, I'll touch on it. It's a very brief snippet of cancer, shall we say, in terms of the later diagnoses. But I do want to mention it because I think it's really important, because I had cervical cancer that was caught by a smear.
Yeah.
So I just recommend everyone goes for smears, basically, because if it wasn't for the smear, it might not have been caught as early as what it was. It led for me to have a hysterectomy. I got on with my life and didn't actually even really make any changes or do anything different with my life at that stage. But then later on, and what I just want to put a caveat in here is that I never blame myself for my illness or anything like that. You know, I don't think anyone can be blamed for having cancer or anything else.
Yeah.
There's lots of reasons why cancer can develop. I do believe personally, it's you know, and there is evidence going towards this, that stress can be a trigger of cancer, and as can lots of other things. And I also have the BRCA1 gene, so there's lots of things that can be a trigger.
Quite a complex picture.
Yeah, it's a very complex picture. And actually, I think, again, what we don't know, and again, this is where people, they say they think that they're at fault somehow, you know, but actually what we don't know, we can't change anyway. So that's the point. We don't know. We don't know what was going to happen in the future. We don't sometimes know how we live, because we live in this unconscious patterning all the time. Do you see what I mean? A lot of us don't really know what's going on with our brains. We don't
Too
really
busy
know
getting on with our lives to think about it, to be fair. Yeah.
I mean, the statistics are something like 95% of our working mind is we work unconsciously.
Yeah.
It's only 5% that we work from a conscious mind. So what we don't know, we can't do anything about. And it's only actually when these diagnoses sometimes come up that actually it makes us look at our lives and how things potentially could then be different from going forward. It's about how we can make changes going forwards.
Yeah, there's no use looking in the past.
No,
or not usually helpful to look in the past and go, oh, well, it must be this or it must be that.
No,
unless you
it can help a little
think
bit,
to
so you can make a
change.
change. But not so that we sit in it following the same patterning.
Absolutely,
you know. So that's the point. You look at that. Okay, yeah. What could I do differently? And that's about improving the quality of our lives. But 2021 came along, and we, you know, as we know, we had the pandemic in 2020. It was a massively stressful time, and as you said, you know, I was in the beauty industry. I had my own business, and that was stressful. It was really stressful, and it was very stressful being in the close contact industry. I think every industry was stressful during COVID, but the close contact industry was really impacted, one of the hardest.
Absolutely.
You know,
all sorts of ups and downs and changes.
We couldn't do anything. We couldn't go back to work. We were back 1 minute, like a lot of other industries. We were back 1 minute, back, you know, weren't back the next. We were one of the last industries to return to work. And, you know, and running a business was just stressful in the first place. You know, managing staff, just trying to crunch the numbers, you know, everything else that you need to do as a business owner. And I was actually quite excited in 2021 to be returning to work after, obviously. But I want to backtrack a little bit, because at 2020, when the pandemic hit, I was actually at burnout, and I think that's a really important point to make here.
Okay.
I felt really at burnout, and I was actually looking forward to taking a break. But of course, the break didn't really happen, because then we had to learn about the pandemic and moving through it, and, you know, furlough and all those, you know,
so
things.
much to get your head round.
So much. But actually, it was really, really, really stressful. So I was already at burnout, and then there was a really big element of stress about how our businesses were going to survive. So in April 2021, I was actually really looking forward to going back to work and actually getting going with it again. But then I was actually diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Big story in itself, and I won't go into the circumstances surrounding how that happened, because it's sort of fairly irrelevant, because I wasn't even in the country at the time. But it was like a bombshell, absolute bombshell. And it really started my journey of looking at myself, which had actually started back in the pandemic a little bit. Because of that burnout period, I'd actually started looking at me. everything starts from us, doesn't it? You know, as I directed about the dramas that we create and everything else, and if we're not managing our business as well, it starts from us.
Yes.
We're at the top of the chain, and we
Yeah.
need to look at that. So I started looking at me, doing work on myself, but I felt like at that stage it was all a little bit of an intellectual level rather than a full mind-body connection, which is what, you know, I talk about now, quite a deep level. And actually, I went through that whole 2021, going through chemo, putting one foot in front of the other, trying to navigate my diagnosis, navigating the fact that at this point I was also found out that I was BRCA positive, that impacted my family greatly. I mean, my daughter and my two nieces have got BRCA. I lost my sister to breast cancer back in 2010. We didn't know that she
Didn't
was
know about
BRCA,
it.
so this had such a massive ripple effect.
Yeah.
So actually, all I really did was carry on being stressed.
Yeah.
I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to get through. How is this impacting my family? How do I navigate treatment? I've lost my hair. I'm trying to do all these things. And actually, you know what, Sue? I was actually just trying to put on a brave face.
Yeah.
Really just trying to put
Yeah.
on a brave face.
And doing as you were told.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can feel myself actually, the emotions still come up. I can feel,
I'm
you know,
sure,
they're
yeah.
still there in my body. You know, it's like a patterning, you know, that you can still remember. So 2022, actually, by this point, I was actually given the all clear. My prognosis actually was really, really positive. They caught it, they felt it was confined to the ovaries and they whipped those out, and I had chemo and it was all belts and braces. And I moved on with my life. But you know what? I didn't really make any massive changes. I still carried on creating drama, running around, stress, running my business. And actually, in some ways, I was then trying to do too much to make up for all I felt like the lost time that I'd had over 2020 and 2021. And I was actually doing lots of fun things. We were traveling a lot and just, you know, I remember we went to San Diego and I went to Amsterdam and I went to this and I went to that and I went to that and I was doing all this stuff.
And is that what you call creating drama in terms of doing just blindly doing rather than thinking consciously about what you were doing and what effect it was having on you and acknowledging the feelings that you had going on?
Absolutely. There was no acknowledgement to anything. No acknowledgement to anything. It was just, it was almost like a big party. It was like a big celebration, you know, which is great. I was doing all this stuff, which was fun. You know, it was really fun.
Well, we were all a bit like that coming out of lockdown, so doubly so when you've been through that experience as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But with that, there comes a certain amount of stress again, and nothing's really changing, and I'm running around and I'm running on empty. I'm still running on empty because I haven't changed anything about myself. I haven't changed any habits. I haven't really done that deeper level work. Surface level work that I was doing, and it wasn't really at an embodiment stage. And I started, though, during that time, actually, towards the end of 2023, doing my coaching qualification because I knew that that was a journey I wanted to go on. It wasn't to do with cancer, particularly at that stage. It was just I knew that this was important work that was starting to help me because I'd started working with coaches. And I knew that I wanted to make some definitive changes to my life. And I felt that coaching potentially would be a really interesting career choice for me, you know, potentially moving forwards. But in 2000 and actually, I think I said 2023, but it doesn't actually matter. It's actually the end of 2022 and then 2023, almost sort of about 2 years to the date of my first diagnosis, I was actually told that it had come back. And that was devastating. Absolutely devastating because my prognosis had been good.
Yeah.
The chemo was belts and braces. Why was I sitting there 18 months later being told that I had a 7 centimetre tumour in my pelvis and nodules of cancer all over my peritoneum, and that the chances of being cured were pretty much 0, and they may get me into some periods of remission, but it wasn't really looking very positive, you know.
Wow, that must
So
have been, as you say, totally devastating to hear that when you've been running on that, what you described as normal or sort of active, and assuming that the treatment was finished and that you were going to be okay, to then suddenly face a fresh diagnosis with a worse prognosis than you had to start with.
absolutely.
So how did you pick yourself up from that? And
Well,
at what point were you able to
yeah.
have the space to think about that and what you needed to change?
I think in the beginning, after that, I hit rock bottom.
Mm.
Every time anybody came near me with a needle and waved a needle anywhere near me, and there was a lot of needles, and I'm not frightened of needles, but I would just start crying, and my emotional well-being was not great.
Yeah.
And I never really had panic attacks before, but I started having panic attacks. I actually didn't recognize that was what they were, but I would suddenly go into a room with a medic, and I would suddenly coming over really faint and not knowing what was going on,
Really? Yeah.
and just thinking, and actually didn't realize even till later that that's what it was. It was actually a panic attack. I thought a panic attack maybe was somebody who was a bit hyperventilating or
Yeah.
just really, really and obviously it is really anxious, but it has amazing physical effects, panic attacks, and actually I just sit there and I think, I'm going to pass out in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm going to
People
go.
talking all around you and
Yeah,
you're,
yeah,
feeling,
absolutely. And like,
yeah.
whew.
Mm.
And I realized that something really had to change here, that I had to look at everything that was going on in my life at a much deeper level. And I talk in my about with my clients about taking back your power. And for me, I think that's what it was. I felt like all my power had gone underground. Everything was, the control was all with the medics. The
Mm.
control was, everyone was telling me what to do, you know, and I didn't have any control anymore.
Mm.
And I was
Mm.
lost in the overwhelm and the chaos and just that deep spiral and vortex and black hole. It felt like a big black hole that I was in, and I just didn't know how to get out of it. And I'd already started doing some research. I started reading books. Again, reading books and looking at it intellectually is one thing, but actually starting to embody and going, yeah, I'm going to start doing something about this. So I started working with a nutritionist. And I started working with somebody on my mindset who, helped me with meditation and breath work and
Mm.
those types of modalities. And I mean, I was in a very fortunate position, that because I know that when people face a cancer diagnosis, that financially they can be impacted greatly. But I was in a fortunate position that, although definitely beyond, not wealthy, I had enough savings that I could dip into that pot to actually be able to pay,
Survive. Mm.
pay to have some of these coaching and nutritional elements, and to survive for a while, take a little bit of time out of work. But everything for me changed at that point. I changed my nutrition. Looked about how to navigate my day-to-day anxiety levels through breath work and meditation. And I learned as well, and it might sound quite woo, but there is so much evidence now starting to point towards this stuff, that I started to look at visualization and how
Mm.
visualization can impact the outcome.
Yeah.
And I didn't connect with cancer. I didn't sort of sit here as a victim of cancer. I've got cancer. I've got cancer. It's a very different energy. I came from, actually, I'm on a well-being journey.
Yeah.
So I concentrated on what I wanted and not what
On
was
the
there.
healing rather
Yeah,
than,
so it
yeah.
was on that healing. Everything that I told
Mm.
my body and everything that I fed my body and everything that I did was about supporting myself. So I took back my power.
Mm. Mm.
And that's
It's
what it's all
interesting. I
about.
think I mentioned to you I was watching that Chris Hoy documentary recently, and he was talking about how he approached his cancer experience, and in the same way that he approached his sport, as it concentrating on the process rather than the outcome. So actually, what do I need to do to support myself through this, and trusting the doctors to do that bit, but actually, what can I do to support myself? So I'm wondering, and we use the word overwhelm quite a lot, but talking about your nutrition and breath work and this and mindfulness and mindset, etc., it sounds like your average Joe is going to sound like a lot to be, and I'm sure at the time it felt like a lot on top of everything else. So what would you say would be the best starting point for somebody with that? Or
it's a really good question, very good question, because actually, as you say, when people are in overwhelm anyway, and this is the point, and I think for me, actually, I found that by starting to embrace it, that actually there was a bit of overwhelm in the beginning. I actually describe it as my full-time job, which sounds a little bit overwhelming in itself, doesn't it? But actually, I was fortunate I didn't have to work. So actually, I was in a position where it could be my full-time job. My healing became my full-time job.
Yeah.
Because by the time you get to the third time, there isn't any mucking about anymore. So, but what it taught me, and it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but it actually taught me to slow down. And that's the point. If you can actually learn to slow down, then you can actually start to look at what's right for you. You can start to bring in your own intuition, because we can be told all these things and you can read the books and everything else, but they're all a bit conflicting as well. What should we eat? What shouldn't we eat? What should we do here? What shouldn't we do? But actually, for me, I've created what's called the mind medicine movement. Okay, so the mind medicine movement is about our mind medicine. And by slowing down and coming back into the breath, we can actually start to look at what's coming up for us intuitively.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the point, because what might work for me won't necessarily work for you. And then you start to lean in towards, what elements do I want to try? What do I want to look at? And taking one bit at a time, because we don't have to take everything in one hit. And I have a framework as well underneath that mind medicine movement that's called SIPs.
Yeah.
Because actually healing starts with gentle sips. It doesn't start with massive gulps.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from that rushing about, that overwhelmed space. It actually comes by just coming back in, just
taking back that control.
And if you can actually feel it, I don't know if you can hear it on the podcast itself, but the energy changes when you just come back into, I'm just going to sit with my feet on the ground. I'm just going to almost imagine those roots coming through the bottom of my feet. And I'm just going to just take a few deep breaths. And that's all it has to be about. It doesn't have to be this great big visionary thing. People think they've got to visualize all these spiritual aspects. It's not about that. It's actually just coming back to ourselves. What do I need? What do I need in this moment right now? And that's one of the biggest questions that you can ask yourself. And actually just to come back, to ground yourself in with your feet flat on the ground, take a few deep breaths with your favorite drink, cacao, favorite podcast. At this moment, I'd like you to be quiet, actually, so probably not your favorite podcast. But to actually just come back in and just to close your eyes and actually just ask yourself the question, what do I need to do to support myself now?
Yeah.
And it takes the overwhelm out of it.
So it's taking it back to basics as to what your body is telling you you need.
Yeah.
And intuition.
Yeah.
And taking the time for those small steps.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about small steps, slowing it down.
Because it's quite, I don't know about you, but sometimes sort of on your social media feed, you get a lot of stuff coming through when you're involved in a particular area. Of course, the algorithm sends you the stuff and it's like, God, what else?
Yeah.
What else? And it can get to a saturation point where you just want you can imagine just switching it off and saying, I can't listen to that anymore. So actually you're not going to learn anything from it, but just almost rationing that and keeping it, picking up on the things that speak to you.
Yeah.
Is the key
because there's
to
so
it.
many claims, isn't there? I mean, you go on, matcha tea can cure cancer, turmeric can do this, that and the other. And I'm all for a lot of that. So I'm not knocking any of that, because I bought a lot of that stuff in myself. But again, intuitively try and look at what works for you and what you can manage. What small
What you can manage,
changes
what you can afford, what you can got time for.
Absolutely. And so all those elements have to come in. What do I really, what talks to me out of some of this? So yes, do your research, but then just sit with it and just sort of, as I say, just lean into what feels right. But for me, the biggest thing is actually calming the nervous system down.
Right.
It's not about running around being busy. So I sold my business at that point. I realized I had to make those big changes, and I had to just come back to literally slowing everything down, because that is the start, and coming out of my head and connecting with my body and listening to what that wants. And it's not always an easy thing to do, because we can be very head driven as people. But we know that there's a mind body connection.
Of course,
what it's like if you get anxious and maybe you need to go and rush off to the toilet, or you might be doing public speaking or something. Do you know what I mean? And you suddenly get really nauseous, or you may, as you say, have to go run to the loo or whatever it is. The nerves can really kick in. So actually trying to bring calm can bring about clarity.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense to calm everything down, because if you can calm your mind down, you calm the body down, you calm the systems down, and also give an opportunity by calming things down. You're giving it the space and the opportunity to heal better,
absolutely,
and in a different way.
Yeah.
And
SIPs, going back to that, I mean, obviously it stands for something rather than just gentle sips, but it is about literally slowing down, identity work. So looking at who we are, as our values, our shadows, all those types of things. Looking at what's holding us back in life and how we want to show up moving forwards. Looking at our purpose again, so that's the P. The purpose of things, and the S, and I think the final S is actually ought to be at the beginning, because actually it's looking at self-love. What we can give to ourselves, because that's so powerful. We judge ourselves so strongly as people, and actually we sometimes think of self-love as being egotistical, but ultimately we wake up with ourselves every day, we go to bed with ourselves, we live with ourselves, yet we're so judgmental of ourselves. And actually learning to acceptance, I think, is really big and key here as well, because actually if we can come back to a level of acceptance, we can bring about again a lot of peace into our lives.
We tell ourselves a lot of things that you would never say to somebody else.
Absolutely.
Don't you? And I notice it all the time with my clients. The lack of self-compassion I find extraordinary, because they show compassion for everybody else and care for everybody else and what everyone else is feeling around them, but actually not really taking that time to, or perhaps haven't taken that time, or need to learn how to take that time to get to know themselves better. And whether it's journaling, spending time just out of the house, whatever it is, sport. I won't use the word exercise, that's terrible. Activity, eating differently. It's being able to give yourself permission to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually nature, we mentioned, that was a really big, important part of my journey as well, because again, that helped me to just slow down, to get out in nature. Something very healing about nature. And just being able to sit I started hugging trees.
Why not? Why not? It's not going to do any harm. I'm sure the trees loved it.
I know. And you never described me as a tree hugger. Anyone who knew me would never have described me as a tree hugger.
I would never have had you down as one.
No, exactly. But now I love hugging a tree.
Yeah.
I love my plants and the greenery and bringing it in. And nature itself, I think, is really, really healing.
Yeah.
And again, it sounded quite woo, but I do believe we're all connected.
Yeah.
You know, we are all connected and we've got this energy around us and it's tapping into that.
And you've started to do more of that. I don't know if you want to talk about the work that you've been doing recently around energy and healing and sound, because I know
I
that's
love
sort of
it. Yeah. So not only am I a coach, obviously I've taken all my therapeutic background because massage was obviously a big part of my job, you know, but my career and, you know, helping people. But it was very much, let's get somebody out of pain. It was like, you know, very deep tissue. It was, you know,
coming in late in the day.
Yeah, all my treatments were about results. Let's bring about all these amazing results. It was quite aesthetics and it was all, you know. But actually, back in the day when I first started, I started out more slightly holistic and then I moved into this sort of quite masculine energy of just creating all these results, which is great, not knocking any of it. But what I've done now is gone 360 and I've gone back very much into the holistic space. And so people can come to me for coaching. And I'm sure as we go through, obviously the podcast will be sharing more about what coaching is about. But they can come to me for that. And that can be online or in person. But they can also come, if they're local, and have a holistic, what I now call my mind medicine massage. And it's gorgeous. It's so lovely. And it actually puts sound bowls onto the body. It's almost like being in a sound bath because I play the instruments around the body as well, but I actually put them onto the body and those vibrations go through the body. And you know, it works with water and our energy, and everybody who comes and has the experience just feeds back
Haven't
about
tried
how
it myself
wonderful it
yet,
is.
Sarah.
Well, I know.
Hint. Yeah.
I know. It's time you came over, Sue. Time you came over. But it also includes touch therapy, which is a much lighter touch. Because again, people when they're going, particularly if they're going through a cancer journey, and I focus a lot more on people when they actually are facing that cancer diagnosis, to try and help teach them some of these skills that they can use to slow themselves down, to come back into themselves, to reset the nervous system, to come out of fight and flight, which we're in with life anyway, but you're certainly in by the time you get a diagnosis.
Course, yeah.
So it's about giving people the space to actually come in, and sometimes deep tissue, it's not always great. We don't really want to be like working with the lymphatic system either. So it's often about light, intentional touch to actually just create this wonderful experience for people, just to have that space just for themselves.
Yeah, really therapeutic.
Yeah.
So questions that come to my mind then is obviously with this podcast, one of our kind of aims with folks is to raise awareness of the things that people are available to people and that people can do for themselves.
I knew that was going to happen. There comes test the fire alarms.
Okay.
We can snip that bit out. That's fine.
So
we'll pick that up.
So
just give it a pause just for an editing purpose. No, I think that should be it. So, right, pause. Hang on.
So that all sounds so lovely and very therapeutic. And what I was wondering was, part of the reason for us doing this podcast is to give people the information that they need about things that they can do for themselves, or things that are available that they can go and look for where they live. How did you go about finding what you needed when you had that second diagnosis? Because as well as all the buzz of everything else and what you described as sort of that calming down, slowing down and thinking about getting more in touch with your intuition, but there must have been some external research as well. So how did you find that?
It's a really good question, because ultimately, I think because as I say, because I'd gone through that first diagnosis, I'd actually had a bit of time to read some books and to do that. And obviously,
Okay.
as I explained before, my journey with coaching had sort of already then started before I was diagnosed for that, well, third time, but certainly second time in that
In recent years,
in that
yeah.
recent years. So I actually had a few people in my network that I could tap into. And
Okay.
I think that's the point of this podcast, is trying to bring together as well some of these resources for people. So they, because actually, where do you go and find these
Yeah.
things? Which is why it's such a good question. So I had somebody on my coaching course, because I'd already started doing my coaching training, who was a nutritionist.
Right.
So I was actually able to go to her and say, help. And I'd also had a guy who had been introduced to me through one of my best friends, who had, and I'd gone on a couple of retreats with him, who, funny enough, I'd actually only met in the year before, in that year, but sort of between the diagnosis.
Right.
And I started at that point, starting to learn a bit about meditation, not masses, but I'd started tapping into some of
Start
these
exploring
things.
it.
So I explored it. So because I was aware of him, I was actually, and I knew as well that he was a coach, as well as helping with meditation and breath work, that I was actually able to go knock on his door, basically, and say, actually, Brett, can you help me? I need somebody who can really hold my hand in this situation and help, because I really think meditation is going to be such a useful tool from, what I've learned so
Yeah.
far. What was really good about that is that actually he didn't really put up with any nonsense from me either. I actually probably needed a bit of a kick up the arse at that point, to be honest, because he obviously held my space and held my emotions, and that's really important, because suppressing emotions is not healthy for us in any way. It's about allowing the emotions. But what he didn't, he was the one who was actually able to teach me about how the body listens to the mind. And actually, Sarah, you're on a healing journey, come away from the cancer a little bit, you're on a healing journey. And didn't also allow me to sit and wallow, because that also wasn't
I was going to say,
healthy.
was that a tendency at that time? Yeah.
I think at that point I could really be sitting in my victim, and actually like, oh, woe is me a little bit. You know what? I've been diagnosed with cancer.
Understandably,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
understandably. And, and sometimes you actually have to sit in victim for a little while. That's all okay
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
and I just want to actually put
Absolutely.
that caveat across.
Yeah.
Because actually it's important almost to come into victim, but then actually what we can do is actually look at our choices. How do we make our choices to then, yes, you can be in victim, sit in it for a while, but who wants to sit in
Who wants to
victim
stay
forever?
there?
I don't want to
Yeah.
sit there and wallow in
It's not a
that.
good place to be.
Yeah, I'm almost envisaging like
Yeah.
Shrek sitting in
I was gonna
sitting in
say,
the shit.
I've
Do you
got,
know what I mean? And all the bubbles coming around, and I'm sitting there going, oh,
oh, yeah.
and sitting in all that. That's almost what I'm visualizing.
I'm never getting out of
Yeah,
this.
I can't get out. How do I get out? But actually, what he then did was actually, come on, Sarah, actually, you've done the victim, you've got some choices, and actually your
Yeah.
choice is to move towards a wellness journey.
Yeah.
You've got this.
Yeah.
He was actually somebody to say, you got this, and actually he could take me through, and he started teaching me really how to meditate, how to sort of drop into my body. And, so I was lucky. I did have some really, really useful mentors and teachers around me who could
Yeah.
take me through that stuff. But I sort of needed that,
Fantastic.
because actually and that's where coaching can benefit so much to people, because when you're in the diagnosis and moving beyond the diagnosis, to try and do some of this stuff by yourself is tough.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
it's
a
someone
lonely
to share.
place.
Yeah, it's someone to share, someone to support,
Yeah.
someone to hold your hand and actually guide you.
Yeah.
It's about being guided. And I think the first time not taking up any of that and just trying to read it all through books again, that can just become overwhelming.
And I think one key word there that you used was that healing. If you is to have that sort of switch of reframing, that switch of mindset from I'm unwell to I'm healing, to whatever extent that is, but thinking in that way that the actions that you're taking are towards your you're healing. It might be survival to start with, but ultimately healing.
Yeah.
But that's a different way of looking at it, rather than, you say, wallowing in that place that's not really helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And really, I think that leads into what's really important here, and what we haven't mentioned yet, is that by the time the end of 2023 came about, I was healed. Whether we call that remission or whatever, but at the moment it's been 2 years. I've been 2 years cancer-free.
Fantastic. Yeah.
When I went, I did have chemo. I'm all about integrating this. This isn't about separating this.
Yeah.
This is, as I say, about taking back
Choices.
your power that you can do whilst going, being supported by the medical team, and being guided by them. But I know my medical team never expected me to get the result that I did, and because they told me that.
Yeah.
And actually, after 4 rounds of chemo, I underwent surgery that they actually didn't expect to be able to do. All the nodules on my peritoneum had gone, and the tumour that was in my pelvis had gone down from 7 centimetres down to 3 centimetres, and was literally hanging onto the side of the peritoneum by a tiny little thread. And all they had to do was go in and snip it off.
So you actually made their job a lot easier,
absolutely,
than they expected at that stage to be facing.
And I remember, and honestly, this was my surgeon's exact words, were after he saw me after I came round, and he said, "You are a miracle." He actually used those exact words, were, "You are a miracle."
Wow.
I don't know what you've been doing, he said, but basically keep going, because you are a miracle. We never expected to find that result. And I honestly believe, Sue, that actually comes down to that power of the integrative approach, by the miracles of our own mind-body healing, as well as actually what the medics provided for me.
Alongside it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'm very glad that you found that way forward, and that you were able to show your surgeons what you'd done, and how you had healed. And thank goodness that Brett was
You weren't
there
going to say that, were you?
but also that you knew Brett, and you were able to tap into that and benefit from that guidance as well, which obviously made a huge difference to you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you for sharing all of that. You really are a miracle, and an incredibly skilled practitioner as well. So do you want to sort of finish off by adding anything in about what you want to get from, or what you want other people to get from this podcast as we go forward?
Just really the resources that I felt were missing.
Yeah.
It's a place where people can come, they can listen. I really hope it doesn't put anybody into overwhelm or anything like that. It's about just offering those bits. But what I would say to people is, take the bits that resonate with you. It's...
Take what you think will be useful.
Absolutely, because there is so much out there, as we talked about already. So take the bits that are really useful for you, what resonates with you, and shut out the rest of the noise.
Yeah.
And I really hope that this doesn't provide noise for people. This actually just provides useful information that people can sit with, and just go forward.
Gently presented. And I think that's why I was talking about social media, is that it's coming at you whether you want it or not, and can be really overwhelming. Whereas you can pick and choose what you listen to here, and as Sarah said, what you take from it. But what we will try and do is provide you with people that understand where you are, and might be able to give you some tools to help you in whatever way you want to take that. So thank you, Sarah. That's
it's
been
amazing.
Been great, really pleased to be making a start with this. And
episode 1 done.
Yeah. Look at us.
We've been talking about this podcast for quite a while, haven't we, Sue?
Probably a good
year, 2 years,
at least,
maybe.
A year, isn't
absolutely.
it? We're busy people.
We have been busy people.
I think one thing that we both know is that we manage our energy a lot better these days than probably for you pre-diagnosis, but for me pre-coaching and working for myself, I'm able to manage that better. So this is coming at the right time, I think. And yeah, looking forward to telling stories, hearing stories, and seeing what difference we can make.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Sue.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Get the strength you want and need from real stories and expert voices. It's time for Your Way Now.
Thank you for listening to Your Way Now. If you have a story you'd like to share, or would like to be a guest, or have ideas about what would be helpful to hear on future episodes, we'd really love to hear from you. Please remember you're not alone on this journey, and your voice really does matter. So until next time, this is Your Way Now.